Abedin is one of Hillary Clinton's most trusted advisors. By her side, from the Clinton administration to her presidential campaigns, to the Secretary of State's offices, to the Secretary of State's office, where she was one of the highest profile Muslim Americans to serve in the executive branch. You may also know her from her relationship with Anthony Weiner, but she has not told her full story publicly until now. In her new book, Both and, Abedin shares her extraordinary personal journey, from growing up in Saudi Arabia to being the right-hand person to one of the most important and powerful women in the world. And Huma Abedin joins me now. I was saying this to you off camera, so I'm just going to say it to you on camera. It is sort of shocking to me to think about the fact that we've never really seen you do interviews or hear you, because you're so familiar to those of us who've been following particularly Democratic politics for so long. But you really were the person that was just off to the right. So how did it feel to move from just off to the right to center stage telling your story?
Well, to be honest, first of all, I'm so excited to be on the show with you today. But I have to say, I prefer the being behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I prefer being invisible. Everything is new to me. So I'm emerging into this world where all the things I would say to somebody else, we were talking about this earlier, don't forget to say this, don't forget to do this. I know all the mechanics, but being in the chair, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
Just getting used to it.
Getting used to it and doing a brilliant job of it. So I want to talk about your family. I am semi-obsessed with your upbringing, which was international. It was cross-cultural. It was fundamentally American and fundamentally immigrant, but also quite international. So you were around the world. You lived in Saudi Arabia. You come from, I wrote this down, you come from free people. Free women who were true to their faith, but within the constructs of that faith, really insisted on education, insisted on being free.
That's right.
Talk about what that did for you growing up as a young girl, as a young Muslim girl.
Well, you know, Joy, it is one of the reasons I start the book saying that I grew up surrounded by stories. I was raised to honor a legacy of my forefathers and my foremothers, and the arc of my book ends where I really do honor the matriarchs in my family, because I came from, my father was Indian, my mother was a refugee, had to leave India, and they migrated to Pakistan after the partition. And for them, education was almost a religion. Yeah. And I owe it. I write the story of my grandmother 100 years ago demanding to be educated, which was not the norm for girls at her time. And she was able, actually, my grandmother never went to a formal school. My mother was mostly homeschooled. And then at 21 to get a Fulbright, or 23 to get a Fulbright, to come to the United States, she gave up everything. Her family, her people thought her parents were crazy. What are you doing? Sending your unmarried daughter, leaving Pakistan, getting on an airplane, going to Philadelphia. Yeah. And she did. I mean, she followed her dreams. And I am so conscious of the sacrifices that my parents made. My father, struggled with terminal illness. He was ill most of my life. But they did this for their children. I mean, they pursued the American dream, and boy, did I get to live this extraordinarily privileged life because of them.
I have to talk about your relationships, because it feels natural, having read about your upbringing and your background, that you gravitated toward these relationships with people who were so different from you. Talk about Hillary Clinton, somebody so formidable in your life that she almost could have been in your family.
That is an observation that nobody has made, but it is true for me that I left. One of the reasons I liked growing up in the Middle East is having this really strong sense of community and support, and you're kind of involved in each other's lives. If there's a funeral, everyone shows up. If there's a wedding, everyone shows up. It's kind of this culture where when my father had to go to the hospital for his kidney transplant, our friends took us in, moved our furniture over for us to be comfortable. And my parents really taught us, I think one of the most important lessons my parents taught us was radical empathy. Like, they were not parents who told us so much as showed us by example. And then in the end, it was our choice to do whatever it is. All they required is we be educated. Yeah. To land in the White House and to have a boss like Hillary Clinton, I felt like that same kind of culture of community, Hillary land, there's a whole chapter. Yeah. It was very similar.
I'm trying to find this quote here about Hillary Clinton staying with Bill Clinton, because your family was so loyal to one another that it had to be jarring to work for somebody who, in the end, her husband had some failings with loyalty. And you write, in all the frenzied speculation about why Hillary Clinton stayed in her marriage, that it was a political arrangement, that she did it so she could launch a political career of her own. Skeptics tended to rush over the very obvious explanation. She did it because she believed it was the right thing to do for herself and her family. And with that, I want to set up. an issue that happened in your own relationship, because obviously Anthony Weiner, who was somebody obviously so different from you, different in religion, different ethnically, in every way, you're married. What drew you to him, first of all, initially?
You know, I fell in love with his exuberant. He was smart and he was interesting and he was in public service. And it felt like our values and principles are very much aligned. And as I tell in the story, I mean, we met in 2001, kind of, just went our separate ways. But there was an attraction to him, and I really felt like, he was my friend before he was anything else, and we sort of fell in love by accident.
With all the things that happened between 2011 and I think you guys left separated in 2016. Why'd you stay?
Well, I think a lot of people look at our relationship now through a 2021 lens, and I think in the moment, the first time that the story broke about Anthony's scandal, we were newlyweds. We were living this extraordinary life. I was at Buckingham Palace, deeply, madly in love with my husband. He was the first man I had ever been with, and so I was in shock, but I was also carrying his child. I mean, we just talked about my father. I did not have a choice when my father was taken from me.
Yeah.
And knowing I was carrying his child, I knew that I wanted to give my son the opportunity to be raised in a household with two parents.
Yeah.
Obviously, over the years, things escalated. And in every one of those instances, Joy, I really tried to make the best decision for my son, for myself, until I got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore.
Now, let's talk about something that involves your husband, involves Anthony Weiner, but also involves the election. The 2016 election was so traumatizing for so many people. I want to play for you. This is 3 for my producers. And this is the moment James Comey made an announcement.
Breaking news tonight, a bombshell from the FBI director. 11 days to the election, the feds investigating newly discovered emails related to the Hillary Clinton private server case, found during a separate probe into sexting allegations against her top aide's husband, Anthony Weiner. New information still coming in. Donald Trump seizing on a stunning turn of events.
You write about your feelings in that moment toward Anthony Weiner, but also toward Jim Comey. Talk about that.
Well, in that moment, what I felt, and as I recount in the book, I walk into this restroom and it felt selfish to feel for myself. I was so shocked. I had thought I, controlled the situation. I thought I had figured this out. I had tried, to help Anthony in as best a way I possibly could, even though I really was not capable and, was not successful doing that. To me, I just didn't understand why nobody had reached out to make this earth-shattering revelation 11 days before the election, an unprecedented move. It's not something I'm saying. I mean, others have said in the history, the past 70 years, no FBI director had done anything like this. And for me, part of the shock, Joy, was the fact that I would have gladly cooperated, provided whatever information that I was asked. And I write the story in the book right at the beginning of the campaign when the FBI investigation started. I'm sitting in a conference room with Hillary and I see some articles saying that, State Department aides were asked to provide information to the FBI. I see my name and no one had contacted me. I go back to my office and contact a lawyer friend saying, this is saying that I need to provide information. I would have been happy to provide that information. It is why the shock at that announcement, and then obviously the 2 days before the election, the second bombshell, which I think helped her opponent even more.
This is a brilliant book. It's called Both And. I'm going to hold a copy of it. You also get a copy of this, both because it isn't a truly American story. It's an international story, and it's a well-told story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Huma Abedin. It's such an honor.
It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Author of Both And.